Hello and welcome to the Anime Advocates, the show about what to watch and what to look for from ADV Films. In the history of anime, I can't recall too many cult favourites that have generated quite the polarising reputation as Elfen Lied. Based on the equally controversial manga by Lin Okamoto, the 2004 TV series still endures a relatively mixed reception from critics and audiences owing to its unapologetic use of distressing visual and thematic material. On this episode, I hope to clear up some of the more common misconceptions of Elfen Lied, and whether there's truly more to it than being an exercise in tastelessness. Is the revulsion justified, or did it achieve cult status for a reason? Let's find out. In a top-secret research facility off the coast of Kamakura, Japan, experiments worse than torture are conducted on a new race of evolved humans known as Diclonius. Distinguished by their protruding horns and psychokinetic abilities, they are reviled as a threat to humanity due to their destructive means of reproduction and uncontrollable violent nature. One fateful evening, a Diclonius called Lucy breaks free from her holding chamber, murdering dozens of security personnel in the process. Before she can make her escape off the island, she is taken off guard by an armour-piercing bullet, causing her to fall unconscious into the ocean. Washing up ashore the following day, Lucy is discovered by college student Kota and his cousin Yuka. Unbeknownst to them, however, the effect of her gunshot wound causes Lucy's personality to split, regressing her into an innocent, childlike persona called New. Having just moved into town themselves, Kota and Yuka decide to take New in, caring for her until she regains her memory. With police investigators, fellow Diclonius and a bloodthirsty soldier all on the hunt to recapture Lucy, the two students attempt to make sense of their new friend's identity, whilst also caring for an ever-growing family of lost girls at Kaida House. The big topic of discussion that tends to overshadow all other aspects of Elfen Lied is its extremely transgressive content. Aside from copious amounts of blood and bodily mutilations, scenes of torture, child abuse and animal cruelty are just a selection of plot devices used to showcase the absolute worst of human nature. Juxtaposed with more light-hearted scenes of teenage romance and fan service, it's not unusual for people to suggest the series relies more on shock value over telling a decent story. Such implications are wholly unfair though. While heavily streamlined from the original manga it spawned from, Elfen Lied actually tells an incredibly moving story of love and redemption. Having known nothing but abuse and discrimination throughout her life, Lucy came to cherish the few precious days she had with Kota, the only person to have offered her kindness and acceptance. Tragically, in a series of events fueled by feelings of betrayal and jealousy, Lucy's killer instinct reached its breaking point, resulting in the cold-blooded murder of Kota's sister and father, right before his eyes. With her only friend in tears, begging her to stop the bloodshed, Lucy is forever racked with guilt, forming the basis of her quest for atonement 8 years later. Lucy's personality split obviously complicates matters during her chance reunion with Kota, but even with New at the centre of her being, her interactions with him in a much more childish state make things just that more interesting. With all childhood memories of Lucy suppressed from his mind, Kota can't help but take care of New, whose purity and affection ultimately helped break him out of the sadness he's carried ever since his family passed away. Conversely, even though she's continually pushed into doing horrific things as Lucy, such compassion from Kota encourages the young Diclonius to gradually amend for her sins and start over as a person. Everything eventually comes full circle in a bittersweet climax where, having reminded Kota of their forgotten past together, Lucy breaks down, having no words to describe how sorry she is for his family's death. The apparent rejection of her species' destined annihilation of humanity out of love for Kota is heartwarming on its own, but what really makes this scene so tender is Kota's response as Lucy attempts to leave. Witnessing enough carnage, all he wants is for Lucy to live her life in peace, and despite the anguish she caused him, he has always loved her, both the lonely girl from his childhood, and the person he ultimately came to know as New. Without making the video too sappy, I must confess Lucy's arc as a whole has never failed to move me on a personal level. Throughout my life, I've made plenty of mistakes that have resulted in the termination of many friendships, for which I've always bore a great depression over. But seeing Lucy grow from a broken, despondent wreck to someone who brings comfort and happiness to those who care for her gives me hope that one day I might be able to achieve such a redemption. For all the criticisms thrown at Elfen Lied for its violence and nudity, if a series can inspire me to improve as an individual in such a stirring manner, there's surely more to it than meets the eye. Okay, with my emotional baggage out of the way, let's talk about what else makes Elfen Lied such an engaging watch. I believe the exploration of humanity's fear of the Diclonius is a very thought-provoking element of the series. Do these evolved beings truly want to wipe out the human race? or is it a self-fulfilling prophecy based on their continual abuse and discrimination? Mixed messages from both sides always leave the true nature of the species open to interpretation like this. Lucy certainly fits the profile of someone capable of genocide, but I would argue, given her experiences, her bloodlust is simply the result of mental instability that anyone would suffer from. And if a diclonius like Nana can be tortured without wishing harm upon humans, it gets you thinking whether, with the right care and attention, these horned beings really pose that much of a threat. The individual mini-arcs of the occupants of Kaida House are also charming anecdotes to the overall narrative that are interesting in how they mirror Lucy's own life struggles. Mayu's receipt of a true home after years of abuse, Nana's adjustment to domestic life outside of a cell, and Yuka coming to terms with her feelings towards Kota are so effective in their simplicity, it's hard not to feel a genuine sense of warmth when this unusual mixture of orphans and runaways blossom into a full loving family. Additional episodes would have no doubt helped in fleshing out these stories as they were presented in the manga, but with the creators only having 13 episodes to work with, it doesn't bother me one iota. Even with such a taxing restriction in place, the relationships in Elfen Lied are nothing short of an achievement, and truly elevate the series beyond just a tasteless shocker. By the time Elfen Lied debuted on Japanese screens in 2004, digital ink and paint animation had finally caught up in producing anime that could visually surpass that which relied on the old techniques from the previous century. As such, Elfen Lied's artwork is of exceptional quality that, with a few exceptions, still holds up very well today. The picturesque scenery, modelled after the real-life Kamakura, lends a very romantic backdrop to Lucy's story that heavily contrasts the harsher, dehumanising environments she was brought up in. Meanwhile, smaller details such as falling cherry blossoms and a warm glowing haze breathe an extra layer of dimension that make even the most mundane scenes visually attractive. The sweet, wide-eyed character designs are charming, and I love how the animators alternate drawing styles for Lucy and New depending on which persona takes centre stage. Although a very contentious trademark of the series, Arms' gore effects animation can't be overlooked either. The variety of the kills and the graphic detail on how the different body parts explode, fly apart, and literally paint the scenes red are mesmerising for even the most desensitised viewer of animated violence. It is absolutely brutal and still unnerves me after several viewings. Then again, I wouldn't expect anything less from the studio who rose to infamy with ultra-violent hentai releases such as Kite and Mezzo Forte. Less effective are the CGI vectors used mainly for the Diclonius fighting sequences. They look acceptable enough when composited far away from the camera, but the dodgy animation and simplistic modelling are still quite the blemish in what is otherwise a great-looking production. Music plays a big role in the emotional rollercoaster Elfen Lied takes you on, with the soundtrack featuring a strong dichotomy of peaceful melodies and unsettling horror ambience. The main theme Lilium, however, is an exceptionally powerful composition. Accompanied by a gorgeous title sequence inspired by the work of symbolist painter Gustav Klimt, it is the perfect embodiment of Lucy's pilgrimage, stirring up feelings of melancholy, nostalgia, yearning, and trepidation at the start of every episode. It's very tempting to label such music and the visuals it plays over as pretentious, but whatever impression you have, they're an iconic fixture of the series, indicative of our tormented Diclonius as the puddles of blood that lay in her wake. Easily one of the greatest anime openers of its era. In a bizarrely fitting twist of fate, ADV's dubbing of Elfen Lied has proven to be just as polarising as the series itself. The direction is simply all over the place, with just as many decent performances as there are ones which bring the production down. I think the weak links in the cast would have to be Adam Conlon and Nancy Novotny. Their voices suit Kota and Yuka well enough, and they get the job done whenever their characters are crying or yelling.
Oh, Dad, calm down! You must have thought the
You know what? Just get out of here!
Up, wait a minute!
You heard me!
Unfortunately, such emotion isn't carried through the majority of their scenes, with some of their line delivery being downright laughable in places.
But my skirt, I'm getting mud all over your pants.
So I'll get muddy. So what?
The rest of the cast fare a little better. Cynthia Martinez hits all the right notes in articulating Mayu's vulnerability and innocence.
Don't cry. You promised yourself you'd never cry.
While Sasha Pacinger's irresistibly cute voice is a perfect match for the naive optimist that is Nana.
You know, I hope Lucy never stops being you. I could live here for a long time, and I know I could be really happy.
The actress who single-handedly redeems the entire dub, however, is Kira Vincent Davis. Many fans consider this her greatest anime role, and for good reason. It's a fantastic demonstration of her range, with the distinction of having her voice 3 versions of the same character throughout the series. When voicing young Lucy, Kira plays it very cool and distant, reflecting the character's uncertainty in befriending Kota.
I'm sure you think my horns are disgusting, don't you? What? I'm sick of this.
As new, her quasi-Pokemon dialect can be a little overwhelming at times, but when the role does call for full-on sentences, Kira gives a remarkably sensitive performance befitting of Lucy's alter ego.
Kota! Don't look sad! I'm sorry!
Huh?
I'm sorry!
And with adult Lucy, Kira's really at the top of her game, with the aforementioned climax being particularly heart-wrenching.
All this time, I've lived in hope of telling you how sorry I am. I fought armies just to have this chance. But now, there's nothing I can say that's good enough.
The emotions between Lucy and Kota as they finally disclose their feelings for one another are exceptionally raw, with even Adam giving it his all. The English dub for Elfen Lied may not have been one of ADV's greatest efforts, but for such a pivotal sequence, both actors couldn't have sold it better. So after all is said and done, do I think Elfen Lied is worthy of the cult appeal it's developed over the last 15 years? Absolutely. Its unusual mixture of romance and horror makes it a very unique specimen that doesn't come around too often in the world of anime, which alone I think makes it worth watching at least once. I certainly wouldn't recommend it for the faint of heart, assuming they're still watching this video, but for weirdos like me who like a dash of blood in their romantic drama, or a bit of TNA in their psychological horror, it's an essential addition to your collection. Fortunately for new audiences, as one of 3 titles currently licensed by Sentai Filmworks under the old ADV branding, Elfen Lied is still one of the Texas distributor's most accessible classics. The series has been reissued a number of times on DVD, but if there's one version I'd recommend above all others, it would have to be the Blu-ray. You get a crisp HD picture upgrade and the previously unreleased OVA episode, which, while not required viewing, is still a great little bonus that does help in clearing up a few unanswered questions from the show. Namely, how Lucy was captured by the Diclonius researchers and why she chooses to keep Chief Kurama alive. The perception of Elfen Lied being a soulless gorefest is unlikely to change anytime soon, but in featuring a love story as beautiful as its animation, one can certainly hope that more viewers will be willing to give it a watch and decide for themselves. I am the Anime Advocate, and I'll see you all next time.